Hello and welcome to the Building Podcast. The Building Safety Act was the most significant piece of construction legislation for a generation, and it came in full force last year. It arose from a terrible disaster that highlighted multiple structural failures in our sector, and its successful implementation requires nothing less than a change in the culture within the construction sector. Today's podcast looks at what that cultural change ought to look like. And I'm very pleased to be talking to Scott Kaminski, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Jewell Passive Fire Protection, a company that finds itself in the vanguard of a new world order of the Building Safety Act, and also in an industry that shows little structural change since that of the Grenfell disaster. I'm looking forward to exploring Scott's views on change within the industry and where the easy wins might be and where we must all try much harder. Scott, welcome to the Building Podcast.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation. As I say, there's lots to explore.
It really is, and I'm sure we can take several paths to this, but let's see where it takes us.
Let's see where it goes. So let's start off by giving the listeners an understanding of who you are and what your business does and how you fit into the industry.
Yeah, of course. As Mark kindly said, my name is Scott Kaminski. I'm the COO at Jewell Passive Fire Protection Limited, and fundamentally, we are a fire door surveying company. That's our kind of our niche, our specialist field, and we also look at educating our client base and the people that work in and around our industry, because it's not just one lane. It's very much a case of a lot of different fields of people use the buildings that we try and make safe for them. So that's where we're bringing our practical consultancy, where we can try and push forward the envelope and push forward this industry, which seems to be, it's not so much stuck in a rut, it's almost locked in a rut. So change needs to come about, and we're just trying to work out how we can introduce that.
So we're going to find out who's got the key then, if we're locked in a rut. Then Scott, that's
well,
that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think there's probably a few keys to find, but we can
do
it.
So how long have you been at Jewell Fire Protection then?
I've been at Jewell for 2 years. I've been in fire for several years. Previously, I've been in construction. I was a property developer, and I got into fire because, and it's not a tagline. I care about people, and it's easy to say, "Oh, I work in fire," but for me, I work in life safety. It's the people that use and live in these buildings. They have to know that they're safe.
Yeah,
and I think that's the responsibility that we have to bear, and we have a duty to deliver that for them.
Absolutely. It's any sort of risk assessment. You need to understand what the risks you're taking are, and you need to be able to act accordingly. And people need to think they're safe in the buildings that we're building for them, and that's fundamental, isn't it?
Well, they need to know that they're safe. That's the thing. Not just think, they need to know, and we have to demonstrate that that's the case.
Yeah. So here we are. You're running a possibly a niche building company consultancy in the sector, in what is a very, very large construction machine.
Yes.
What do you see the key challenges your business faces in delivering the efficient and effective service that you're trying to deliver?
That's quite easy to answer, but lengthy to explain. The key challenge is there's not enough of anything.
Right. Okay.
There's the volume of works required is just colossal, and I don't even think it's quantifiable. When you're thinking you've got new buildings that are currently being signed off, you've got buildings coming out of the ground, and then you've probably got an 85% body of work which is pre-existing.
Yeah.
And no one can put an actual figure to that. You've got several thousand buildings that remain untouched in terms of remediation and addressing their actual clarification to where they sit in terms of compliance and safety.
Yeah.
So the work volume is colossal, which leads on to the personnel. We just don't have enough personnel in all tiers to even make a dent in delivering this. And, and the key element of that is boots on the ground. We can all have a meeting, we can all sit on a Teams call and we can push the plate of biscuits around and talk about what we're going to do. But unless we've got the personnel delivering that on site, making these buildings safe physically, then we're not going to progress. And of course, that leads on to time. How long will this take to actually, even if we had a miracle answer now, you and I finished this conversation and when we've got the light bulb moment, how long is it going to take to deliver that? No one knows. So there's all these different components which weigh up against us. And again, another part of that is ethical practice. When we're dealing with life safety, we have to make sure that our ethics and our morals are in line with what we're trying to achieve. And there is a big issue there as well. And that's probably a whole nother conversation.
Well, I mean, I think the volume of work is a challenge, and the Building Safety Act suddenly made everybody aware of the need to be safe and to be able to demonstrate that safety. And obviously there was a vast amount of work. We suddenly realized the structural challenges in the sector suddenly exposed these weaknesses, and it doesn't perhaps come as a surprise that we suddenly need a lot of people to plug that gap to go and do work the industry should have been doing properly before it was handing over buildings. So I think that's right. Tell me, Scott, are most of your clients developers like you were in a previous life, or are you working for main contractors or within the supply chain? Where do you see your bulk of your clients?
I'd say the body of our client base is generally block and project management companies.
Right.
So they've got their portfolio. They now have been told what they need to do and what they need to deliver. And this is another issue in the industry. There's no real clear delivery of the education of what that actually means in the real world and in practice. So we spend a lot of time with our clients in that whole education sort of, it's kind of a merry-go-round, to be fair, because as you know, the goalposts change pretty much every day. But it's sitting down and, okay, this is what you've been now told. This is the situation. How do we move off the situation? How do we start making your portfolio day by day move towards where they should be?
And you're lucky in many respects, because that is a very hard and fast sort of specification, isn't it? For what this door either complies or it doesn't comply. This system.
Oh, that's a dangerous statement now, Mark. It's a dangerous statement.
I'm always told that I've been told that there's a very clear there's a fire door has some very prescriptive requirements that it has to achieve.
Absolutely. But it's also layering over those requirements in the real world. Like I say, the buildings coming out of the ground now, you can pretty much guarantee they should be as per design, as per test, as per specification. And you're going to have the O&Ms, hopefully now, to back that up, obviously, for future cycles. But where you've got buildings that are, let's say, a little older, the O&Ms have either not ever existed or they've passed on over management companies and they've dissipated over the years. It's how do you apply what their guidance says we should be working towards to these buildings that don't necessarily adopt those ideals.
So that's a real challenge then for somebody who has to take effectively a subjective decision on something that is in many people's eyes, including mine, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, was meant to be an objective, highly objective process of determining safety.
In the ideal world, it is highly objective, and you have to apply that, of course. But you also have to bring in a heavy stream of pragmatism and holistic review, because no two buildings are the same, no two situations are the same. So it's not a one rule fits all, unfortunately. It would be wonderful it did, because we could make some real headway. But it's a case by case.
So that sort of risk management or risk awareness really can only come from experience, and can't it? Because, because you can't, the University of Life doesn't really come with initials after your name.
Well,
And trying
no,
to
no,
understand how that works is a real challenge, isn't it? Is that?
of course. And again, there's multiple pathways you can get to being to that point where you can make these decisions and make these conversations happen. Obviously time served is generally where we're speaking, and you can bring in the academic.
Mhm.
But yeah, it has to be, and I know we're going to touch on this a little bit, probably a few times, but competency is something which cycles daily with
Yeah.
all industries, but fire, definitely all the time. And that's something we have to work on, demonstrable competency.
Yeah. I mean, that's a mandatory requirement in the Building Safety Act, as every employer has to be able to demonstrate the competency of their staff that's carrying out the work.
Yeah.
So I mean, you talk about the lack of skills and education within the sector and bringing people into it. How do you go about demonstrating that competency for your staff then?
It's obviously you start with an ideal. We would
Yeah.
like people that are aligned with our culture, our practice, our vision, our morals, and our ethics. If you don't have that, then you're fishing in the wrong talent pool.
Yeah.
Before you even begin. And once you find that, I think everything else can be adapted, learned, and applied. If the actual core values are there and the core ethics are there, then education, study, and experience can then be sort of progressed steadily.
That's a really interesting perspective, Scott, because not many people in the industry would start, when asked where competence starts, is on values.
Well, I think it is. As I said, I care about people.
Yeah.
Again, I know we'll touch on this. I couldn't care less about money. Obviously, I understand that it plays a role in everything we do.
Yeah.
But money is not a motivator for me. It's caring. That's the key. It's caring that you're going to deliver what needs to be delivered, and that people are going to be safe. So yeah, I think you start with the person, and obviously there has to be other factors around that. You can't just take person A that is just a good person and assume that they can be molded and built and developed into someone they need to be in this industry. But everything else can be learned and applied. I think the person is key.
I mean, so on all these, these assessments that we're doing for competence, and the industry is looking around at the moment for ways of allowing people to demonstrate their competence. I'm not sure of one. I'm not aware of a single one that puts corporate values, at the top of the list. So I think it's a fascinating place. I understand how you employ people, and values become really important in terms of employing people. I suppose it's unusual to hear somebody saying in terms of the competence, you need to make sure they've got the right values to be able to be competent on that site. But I get it in terms of fire protection and safety of people. I understand that.
Yeah, no, and that's not to say you're just going to have someone that aligns and just set them loose. But I think as a core foundation, that's where you have to focus for me.
Brilliant. And are there enough academic qualifications then to be able to support those once you found the right individual? Are there enough academic courses and qualifications to support what you need to be able to demonstrate it?
Yeah, there's plenty of courses and qualifications out there. The water's a little murky to what they actually mean in the real world. In terms of our corner of the industry, there's a big discussion about the 1 day, the half day fire door inspection courses, and then you can be set out into the wild to be exactly that. And obviously that isn't enough. So there's discussions to be had to refine and develop these courses, to make sure that people can academically display, that they've served some time, they've got that knowledge there. But there's also another project which you and I will need to talk to outside of this particular episode, where I'm looking to build a model around this competency, and it's uniform, it's cross-platform, all industries. but I won't dive too deeply into that. So it's still a red cup project at the moment.
Okay, well, we'll save that conversation for later, but it's
Absolutely.
it's an interesting one. So interesting. Also, you're saying it's simply there's not enough people to touch the amount of work that you've got within the sector,
Yeah.
and fire protection, fire testing is the same as many other sectors. We're all desperately short of people. I think the CITB are saying we need 200,000 or 300,000 people over the next 5-6 years just to service the current demand for construction activities. The other sector I'm involved with in solar, we need upwards of 60,000 people in the next 10 years to be able to service the solar potential. So we're all going to be going after the same people to come into our respective sectors. How do you solve that in fire? How should we go about making this work?
Well, I think the best way is I get first dibs.
Of course.
I think if we have that, then we're good.
Well, you claim your life threatening is you've got to in terms of hierarchy you come above everybody.
I'll pull that card out all the time. Life safety trumps all. I don't even know how you answer that question, Mark. You can't just magic a workforce from somewhere, especially when as you say, you're talking about multiple industries that are short of staff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we have to make these industries attractive as places to work.
Yeah.
How that looks to someone that's looking to either get into an industry, to traverse into an industry, as I did from construction to fire. They're all conversations to be had, but I think they should be had on an open platform.
Yeah.
I think transparency is key.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge is, on these smaller niches that people probably don't know and don't even know exist. So if you're a school leaver today, got no idea that fire protection and fire testing is a career in itself.
No, absolutely. The fire industry is subdivided into so many other categories, and because now there is awareness of what needs to be delivered, the sub industries are growing out and they're becoming their own industries. Doors, fire stopping, everything passive has its own industry now, as well as everything active. It's So you've got this broad marketplace now, and everyone's vying to get the best people in.
Yeah. So okay, no answers there then. That's bad news, isn't it? Well,
Sorry.
can we just move on now to design? Because design is something which, again, clearly identified in the Building Safety Act and requires not only competent people, but a golden thread going through from the design process through into delivery.
Yeah, of course.
How's that interface working in the fire sector? Because it's obviously, if we can't make it work in fire, then we're going to struggle everywhere else.
Absolutely. As I touched on earlier, it's when you've got new buildings coming out the ground, you're in a good position to make sure you can deliver that, and you can start the thread and continue it. But when the body of your work
is that happening even in new buildings? Are you happy that's working in new buildings well?
I would like to say, actually, I will say it's made massive steps forward. A few years ago, when I was doing EWS1 reviews on site to check installations and do some type 4s, you could see the change in culture. Certain developers like, okay, we need to adopt this now to future-proof our buildings in terms of demonstrable installation evidence. So I've seen firsthand that, yes, that has changed, and that has changed a few years ago.
Brilliant.
But
okay.
As with everything, it needs to be monitored to be maintained.
Yeah.
We'll all go off piste if we're left to our own devices, generally speaking. So it doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing. You still need to hit those checkpoints every once in a while.
And,
so
and
new buildings,
they're understood, are they? Those checkpoints.
I don't think they're defined.
No, well, I think I was hoping you were going to say that, because I think we've got work to do in those areas, and that's.
There's work to do in every area. That's the shocking element, but it can be done. It can be done if we're all passing around that hymn sheet and we're all on the same page. It can be done. I've seen firsthand that massive steps forward have been made in terms of establishing that golden thread from the off. But I think critically, the higher concern is in the pre-existing buildings, the older buildings, where it's a grey area to what was even there to start with to where we are now. You know, we've spoken about the white paper I wrote for the meter cupboards in HMOs, which was that's just one element of the whole industry, where I know it's a very, very common issue, but no one wants to address it. And everyone needs to sit down and say, everything needs to be addressed, but you're only going to address everything by doing it in bite-sized pieces. And it doesn't matter where you start, you have to start.
You hopefully start on the high-risk areas, and we know that meter cupboards are a weak link in the chain. I mean, it needs to be on somebody's risk register, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I've seen it time and time again. It comes up in fire risk assessments that the meter cupboard doesn't display the correct integrity. Its structure is incorrect. You know, there's all these flaws, and they're always sitting, slap banging in the entrance of these very, very narrow hallways in these converted HMOs. And this get passed to contractors, and they'll knock out all of these items raised in the FRA, and you have these meter cupboards, and you're going, okay, any ideas? So that's why I wrote the white paper. So it's a jumping off point for discussion.
And are you still seeing building owners and those management companies effectively passing the buck down to contractors, saying you must make this building safe, without any reference to the occupiers and how the occupiers are going to use that building?
Obviously, I'm not privy to all of those conversations.
But
if you want to put something in a box, then yes. It's an industry of buck passing, because fundamentally you're dealing with the highest risk there is, which is life. And people don't want to put their name to something that high value. But we will have to, otherwise we'll just stand stagnant.
Well, isn't that one of the great changes that the Building Safety Act will make, is making people personally accountable by name for some of these things?
But is that the actual solution, Mark?
Well, it tends to think that if people if somebody's got their name on a piece of paper that they've had to sign off, it at least starts focusing people's attention.
But you could also say that you'll have inexperienced property managers, assistant property managers, where they're just handed this, say, "Oh, just sign this. This is your building. This is in your portfolio." They don't know what they're signing, but now they're legally responsible for that building. I didn't like how that was delivered to me. It was delivered like, we've made a noose for you already, so it fits. Just pop it on, and we're good to go.
So what is the solution? I mean, we saw how fire certificates were effectively signed by people who shouldn't have signed fire certificates in the Grenfell inquiry. I mean, they were spectacularly exposed.
Well, I mean, this is current to this day. As we've seen with EWS ones and the forgeries that are still being sort of trafficked effectively. And when I was doing the EWS one reviews, and they were very early on. This is, I was actually there at the conception of that form. And even then, we were having forgeries come through. It's like people were so desperate. You understand the logic, but I don't think people understood the risk and the implications, and obviously the consequence of forging a document like that.
And are you still seeing those forgeries in the sector or not?
Yeah, they're still there. They're still there.
Amazing, isn't it? Really, even here we are coming up to the first anniversary of the Building Safety Act coming into full force. I mean, we've had lots of it for much longer.
It's been drip fed, but here we are at kind of
nearly a year after full enactment, and we've still got those things running around the industry, and people still thinking it's acceptable. I mean, it's just staggering, really.
And this is where it circles back to the ethics and the morality of it all. I think that needs to be a cultural change. So it's great to start in the middle and say, okay, we've got a building safety act that now can be applied and demonstrated and reviewed. But if underneath that starting point, the ethics and the morals are still skewed,
polite way of putting it.
then I don't see how that will succeed.
Yeah. I mean, we always start in this sector by assuming that the morals, we're all on the same page for the morals and the ethics. And it sounds to me we're clearly not, if we've still got people promoting forged signatures on things as fundamental as fire certificates and fire safety certificates. I mean, that's just staggering to hear, really. So how do we go about changing those ethics or getting consistency of those ethics? Because, as I say, most of us go into the sector and we work with people who have the same values as us, but actually the ethics are perhaps even more fundamental than values, corporate values.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Mark. There are plenty of good people out there.
Oh,
There's
there always are.
plenty of good people flying the flag for change and positive change.
Yeah.
I think it's just time. I think it's just people adopting this and treat it as a mission. For us to change and be better for everyone that occupy and use these buildings, commercial and residential. We have to be better individuals.
Yeah.
If we're better individuals, we're a better industry.
So it's, that's become a better individual. You're talking about CPD, you're talking about community involvement and community, getting everybody together to improve everybody rather than just the ones or twos.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're almost, I mean, you're almost coming through to an industry where you're registered or you have registered providers who have to tick certain boxes to get onto that registration form. And that might not be, a lot of people now saying that that's the case. And Rudy Klein on a recent podcast, who's been around the industry for many years, was saying that having fought it for a lot of his life, he thinks registration now is the answer to solve some of these challenges we've got coming forward.
I would agree. But I think having that documented up to the point of registration will also be key.
Yeah.
We can all pepper a CV, we can all, bend the truth a little bit to get ourselves over the line. So I think we have to have grassroots documentation, clear cut evidence to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've done, this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
There's no point sailing past where you're at. Everyone needs to be aware of exactly where they are as well.
Yeah.
And their experience, their skill set, and what they can deliver. I think it's a self-honesty as well.
Yeah. But I mean, that for me it's the company which has to demonstrate the competency of those individuals. It's not for the individual to demonstrate the competency, because it's for the company to put that team together to have a competent service delivery. But that individual needs to be able to demonstrate what they've done and how they've done it and their track record. So not just their qualifications, but also their experience.
Of course, yeah. And I think the individual demonstrates that through their day-to-day work, in actually delivering their role. But yeah, the company has to bear the brunt of that and to make sure they deliver on that side of things.
Yeah. So here's a sort of curveball then.
I like a curveball.
So I worry that so the industry quite often is criticised as being very focused on the projects, and rather than on running a business, your company's focused on how to run a project. Do you think our boards of directors are generally up to changing the culture in the industry? Do you think that we've structured our industry and our businesses to focus on the businesses enough rather than just on the projects they're undertaking? Because we're effectively a project-based industry.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to really make me lose a load of friends. So I appreciate that. Do the boards?
Sorry, I've lost most of mine doing this. That's okay.
I don't think there's a black and white answer, because I think there's a lot of generational application to that as well.
Yeah,
I think you've got certain boards which are very, very, very well established, shall we say. So they might hold different values, different goals, and be working to maybe a different set of, let's say, outdated rules and goals. I do think change is apparent in those boards. I don't think it's all about the bottom line anymore.
No.
And as I said, I'm not money motivated, but obviously I understand where it sits.
You have to make some money. Yeah.
We all have to make money. We all have to make money. It's hard because it's still a business. We're looking to keep people safe and alive, but it's still a business. Everything is a business. I have a very simple view. Life is maths and sales. That's all life is. And you apply it to everything. That's all life fundamentally.
That's all it is. We've talked about competence on sites. We've talked about the need to demonstrate that competence. Grandfather rights have been effectively being wound right out of the sector, right out of the industry now, for everything apart from being on a director on a board. So it's the one area that you don't actually need to be qualified at all.
Yeah.
And you look at some of the recent large failures, business failures, and you look at the competence of the directors there, you have to question whether they were competent for the job or not. And yet
Absolutely.
Here we are as an industry saying we don't need competent directors.
Yeah, and if then the grandfather rights sort of bracket of things, have they not learned anything in that time served in that role on the board?
Whatever it is, yeah.
Because they've just been looking at the bottom of the page.
Yeah. So we were halfway through the design challenge. We got stuck on design for new buildings because they're the ones that actually fall under the major remit of the Building Safety Act, because they have to achieve everything. But the vast majority of your work sounds as though you're dealing with some of the old buildings that are out there. Particularly the high-risk
not
buildings.
Necessarily old. Like we can be talking sort of just 2 or 3 years, but they're obviously classed as pre-existing buildings, and even some of these don't have demonstrable golden threads or O&Ms.
Yeah. So how do we? Is that just a lesson that's going to have to just be borne by property owners and management companies over time, or do you think there's going to be a few prosecutions to make everybody sit up and take notice? I mean, the HSE is generally not scared of making examples of people who are fundamentally wrong.
No, absolutely. And by and large, the HSE do a good job, and they still have that inherent fear in everyone, which is a good thing to have, obviously. I don't know. Can you rephrase that question?
Can I make it an easier one to answer? I'm not sure there is an answer really, because I think it is. My own view is that we're going to need some examples of people being made examples. This is the law now, and this is what you need to do to comply with the law, because if you don't comply with the law, people aren't safe.
Absolutely. I fully agree and echo that. But you could also consider that now we kind of operate as a society on a disposable nature and culture. So those examples, they're long forgotten very, very quickly. And that's not to say there won't be progressive examples following down the chain. But I think it's like, oh, did you hear about XY? Yeah, great. And then 2 weeks later, carrying on with the same practice, which was exactly what XY were doing. I think people have got a short memory. I think that's one of the problems.
And I think you're right. I think that is a challenge. The other question we sort of faltered on is you sort of alluded to the fact that you didn't think that individuals signing the certificates and making people personally accountable was necessarily the answer that the Building Safety Act's come up with is the right one.
It was more how it was delivered.
Right. Okay.
It was like that. It was implemented and it wasn't explained effectively on the shop floor what that actually meant in the real world in practice, and to the individual and their life and the implications of that. And that's what we see a lot in fire. There's a break in communication constantly of what's expected, what's required, and it peters out as it sort of falls down.
Yeah. So that golden thread is in in danger of fraying at that point, isn't it? If that communication fails.
Well, absolutely, yeah, it will fail.
Yeah.
Because you'll have your paper golden thread that's being fed down from the top. You'll have your installation, development, construction threads that are coming up from the bottom, and it's very unlikely that they'll meet in the middle.
Not good news at all. So Scott, what do we need to do? What do the industry leaders need to do to make this happen then? To actually solve or make sure that thread's thick enough to cope with
Well,
some
I'm
of the
glad
problems
you
we're
asked.
going to get.
It's transparency in the requirements.
Okay.
That, I think, it sounds so easy to say that.
Yeah.
And then the delivery of that obviously will have its own challenges. But all of our documentation, it's inaccessible to people that actually need it. Like if all the standards, people have to pay hundreds of pounds to get a standard which they need daily. It's information should be readily available to those that need it.
Yeah. Gosh, we've got some work to do then, haven't we?
Yes, but luckily I've had a couple of coffees this morning, so I'm good to go.
Good to go. Good to go. And I mean, Scott, this is a very unfair question to ask you, but
Thank you.
Fire is front and central of the Building Safety Act. Grenfell was primarily a fire disaster.
It was the perfect storm. It was the perfect storm, and I don't want to sort of dwell on it too much because it's a difficult subject to navigate.
Yeah.
But one of the positives that came out of that tragedy was the need for awareness and change.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to hold in the forefront of all of the decisions that we make going forwards.
I think you're right, but the challenge is that it exposed structural failings in the industry. You had a lot of good people who were working in a very poor structure.
Yeah.
Now, changing a structure in an industry like ours is a real challenge because we're a really fragmented and quite rightly business-focused sort of bunch.
Yeah.
So getting that structural change really is a challenge, and the Building Safety Act has tried to get that focus into the changes we need to do. I suppose my question is, if you've got the challenges you've got around fire, which are front and central, because it was, whilst Grenfell was a disaster, it was fire that was the vehicle for that fire.
It was the catalyst for what do we need to do?
Do you think that all the other critical aspects of a business, of all the other critical aspects of the building must be exposed to the same challenges you've got, and are probably playing catch up with fire because you are the premier and the most important bit that people now recognise to get right?
I would disagree that we're the most important and premier element. I think I'm always about the team. And I think industry is no different.
Nope,
we should all be working as a team, from M&E to construction to fire, everything. We all need to be pulling in the same direction. That's what will stimulate actual change. Sorry.
But if the thread is fraying from design into delivery in your area, I don't suppose it's not fraying in the other areas, the other specialist areas that we've got as well. And I just worry that, we all know how important fire is. Perhaps that's getting more of our attention than some of the other areas.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid point. But again, to echo that it's not, like a catastrophe out there. Change is happening. There is good practice out there, and there is good practice out there in number.
Yeah.
It's just the reality is that we're outnumbered by our workload.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the other thing to remember is that the vast majority of people in the industry are trying to get the right answer.
Yeah.
And it's just there's a few bad eggs out there that can queer the patch for us all. As long as we get the structural change right. That's the bit that I think that's the cultural change around the Building Safety Act, which you talked about at the front of the interview.
Yeah, it's understanding across the board, across all sectors, that we need to change. And that change can be broken up into those in those individual industries, but those changes will affect all of our neighbouring industries, and it brings everyone up, and that really stimulates actual change, actual development in the way we do things.
Yeah. So are you positive, or do you think we've got more work than we're prepared to? For an industry, are you positive, or are you thinking we've got quite a lot of work to get down and we've got to look at our navel a bit more?
I'm both. I know we're staring up a mountain, but it's doable. It is doable. It's not going to be today, tomorrow, but if we get those little wins each and every day, and the losses that we get each and every day, we learn from them.
Yep.
We'll take home more W's, and we will make our way up that mountain.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm very pleased that you're positive, because I think it's a fantastic opportunity for all of us.
It is.
And if we get the right
better
people
to be part of positive change?
Yeah. So Scott, we've had a good sort of canter through the industry and through the Building Safety Act ramifications, and I hope we haven't been too negative, because, as you say, there's a lot of really great people out there working really hard and delivering some fantastic results. What would your sort of final call to arms be for the industry from your perspective as the man in charge of life safety?
Wow, thanks for that one. Call to arms. There's some very fundamental things which people do, I think, through habit. I think social media platforms are very counterproductive in a lot of ways. And we see it a lot in fire, and I'm sure every other industry sees it daily. A lot of contractor client shaming, almost but used as a self-promotion tool. Look what I've seen. Oh no, look how great I am in spotting this. It's like, yeah, you can do that, but you don't have to tell anyone. Just deal with it.
Put it right. Yeah.
Just deal with it. And that's, you're making so much more of an impact just doing that. You're wasting time telling people how great you are. Show them.
Yeah.
Show them. So as a call to arms, strap in, because we will do it. We will do it. There's enough of us to stimulate and achieve this change and get us to where these buildings need to be and where the industry needs to be functioning.
So it sounds to me as though the call to our exactly that is: do it, don't talk about it, get the values right, and get on with it.
We don't need a pat on the back.
No.
Our job, doing what we're doing, is enough.
Well, nobody's going to give us the pat on the back, I don't think. I think we've got to get out of our hole first, and that's
well, yeah, you've got to earn that pat on your back, but
absolutely,
we shouldn't be doing it for that. We should be doing it knowing that we're making people safe. That's to me, that's the baseline.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, we provide, safety is so important on our sites for delivery. We have to make sure our customers are safe in our products, and no doubt about it. No,
and where more should you be safe than in your own home?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Scott, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you, Mark.
Wish you every success in changing the world, and one building at a time, or one client at a time. And look forward to hearing your successes in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the time.
Lovely.